Good morning. I'm Matthew Johnson, Senior Minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Rockford, Illinois. And whether you are joining us at 10 Central on April 26th or later, welcome. Whether you are a member or friend of the Unitarian Universalist Church, Rockford, or you're a member or friend of another Unitarian Universalist congregation who's found your way here because you need worship today, or if you are exploring religion anew and have found us, welcome. Whether you are frightened, grieving, determined, curious, sad, or furious, welcome. Whoever you are and whatever brings you here, welcome. We're coming to you from the sanctuary at the church. With me today is Tim Anderson, my colleague in worship and the music director at the church, and off screen to my right, Lindsay Dunn, our director of religious education, who will be telling the story for all ages later this morning. Autumn Powell, our office manager, is at the back of the hall running the technology for us. And our worship associate, Jessica Hodorine, has pre-recorded their testimony, which you will hear later in the service. We have a guest preacher this morning, the Reverend Dr. Kendyl Gibbons. She has been in this pulpit many times over the years and was my internship supervisor and mentor. Not only that, my predecessor, the Reverend Dave Weisbard, was one of her internship supervisors in Virginia many years ago. Kendyl knows our congregation well, and many of us know her well. She'll share her sermon with us and her reflections on how a humanist might think about the divine and the divine feminine in particular later this morning. Chris Ainsworth, our membership coordinator, is at home, but will be chiming in on the Facebook feed and keeping you all connected. And if you're watching on Facebook, you see a comment area, and I see many of you are already saying hello and good morning to each other. That's great. Be present with us. Be thoughtful about what you post. Remember, it is public, but we are glad to have you with us. And it is a way to turn off comments if you'd like to not be distracted by them. Information's in the newsletter about how to do that if you don't know. We will mostly follow our regular format today, though of course some things are different. The ritual of how we worship most weeks is a source of comfort and connection for us. This touchstone, this habit, reminds us of who we are and what we are about. So I will ring the bell, as we do on Sunday, and we will worship together. We will begin with singing. Tim's going to play and sing, and I invite you to sing along. We will begin with hymn 340 in Singing the Living Tradition, Though Gathered Here to Celebrate, words by the feminist composer and songwriter Christine Dorian Michaels. We'll continue with singing this morning with our hymn of the month, Name Unnamed. We'll be singing verses 2 and 4 this morning. So we'll put the words up and we invite you to sing along. I am so glad that you are all here for worship. If today is your first time with us, we're especially happy to have you joining us online. Please do take a moment to like our Facebook page as a way to stay in touch. Chris will post a link to a visitor form that you can fill out online so that you can be in touch in the comments, or to go to uurockford.org and click on newsletter sign up, share your information with us. We look forward to when we can gather again in person, and we're planning more small groups and classes online so people can participate in community over the weeks and months to come. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith, a beacon of truth, a fire for justice, a warmth for the soul. As Lindsay lights the chalice here at the church, we'll speak together the covenant of our church. Love is the spirit of this church, and reason is its guide, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to serve human need. This is our covenant. Now we'll sing together our chalice response.
May love shine forth through us today. May light of reason guide our way. May beauty, truth, and joy become a flame that burns in everyone.
We come to worship this morning, so wherever you are and whenever you are, and I invite you to breathe in and out, to be present in the place where you are. Notice what's around you, how your body feels, who is nearby, who is in your mind and your heart as you watch this service. To lift your heart, we use that phrase, to lift your heart means to send that energy, that love, to hold in your mind's image those you might be thinking of, those vulnerable, those essential workers and healthcare workers and grocery clerks and delivery drivers and all the rest doing their jobs so some of us can stay home and others can do what needs to be done. I continue to hold in my prayers, and I invite you to hold in your prayers, the families of those members and friends of the church who have died since we were unable to hold their memorial service in person. That list includes the families of Scotty Lichtenheld, Maggie Tienemann, Frank Dyka, Verna Hayes, Kanwar Singh, Alan Bloomfield, and as I just learned, Laura Davis, the wife of Susan Halverson, who died this week after a battle with cancer. Hold Susan in your thoughts and your prayers. It's a strange time. Today looks like a beautiful day here in northern Illinois. The sun is shining. It's not hot, but spring is happening. There are people out on the streets, but not as many. We live in this moment of strangeness. We hold in our prayers the families and loved ones of the more than 50,000 Americans who have died of this disease, and all those working hard to save their lives of those who might yet get it or have it. Doing our part by doing very little seems strange. We want to be heroes, but only some of us are called to do that work. What all of us are called to is to love one another as best we can in the moment we can, to care for one another with tenderness and mercy, so that the spirit of compassion might be stronger than the spirit of fear and suspicion. In such a spirit, we worship this morning.
As a mother cares for her child, as she loves and nurtures and guides, so have I, your God, been with you. I have been beside you all along. I will never forget my own.
Good morning. We're good to go. Okay. I'm Lindsay Dunn, and I'm the Director of Religious Education here at the church, and I'm so happy to be here with you this morning. Our story this morning is Big Mama Makes the World by Phyllis Root. When Big Mama made the world, she didn't mess around. There was water everywhere, and Big Mama saw what needed to be done right away. So she rolled up her sleeves and went to it. Wasn't easy either with that little baby sitting on her hip, but that didn't stop Big Mama, not for a minute. Light, said Big Mama, and you better believe there was light. Dark, said Big Mama, and there was the dark, just as big as the light. You two got work to do, Big Mama said. Don't you be fooling around none. Then she looked at the light, and she looked at the dark, and she looked at that little baby, looking at the light and the dark, smiling and cooing, and Big Mama said, that's good. That's real good. And that's how the first day went by. Next day, Big Mama looked around. Can't tell my up from my down, said Big Mama. Better have some sky here. And there it was, one big sky wrapping over everything, soft and blue as a baby's blanket. Wasn't much else yet but water and light and dark and sky, all doing what Big Mama wanted them to do. And Big Mama, she was pleased all right. That's good, she said. That's real good. And that's how the second day went by. Next day, Big Mama looked around some more and she said, "Get me some light. Got me some light, got me some dark, but I still can't tell what time of day it is. How am I going to know when it's morning, evening, time to put the baby down for a nap?" Big Mama, she wanted to know all right, and anything Big Mama wants, Big Mama gets. That's just how it goes. "Sun," said Big Mama, "you take care of this day business for me." "Moon," said Big Mama, "you take care of the night." Big Mama made the stars too, just in case old Moon overslept sometime. Big Mama looked at the sun and the moon and the stars filling up her sky, just in time for the little baby's nap. And Big Mama nodded, and she smiled, and she said, "That's good. That's real good." And that's how the third day went by. Next morning, Big Mama got up with the sun, and she said, "I need a place to put my feet down when they need putting down." She knew there'd be some foot putting down when that baby of hers got to growing more. "Earth," said Big Mama, "get over here." And it did. All one big ball of mud it was, nothing much to look at. Baby liked it all right just the way it was, but Big Mama wasn't finished yet. "Need some grass to wriggle my toes in," said Big Mama. "Some big old shade trees for hanging a hammock. Papayas and oranges and boysenberries for eating." That's how it was then. Just like Big Mama said, little baby sucking on a mango and grass and trees and fruit all over the place, like somebody tipped over a fruit stand. Big Mama, she looked at all that earth and she said, "That's good. That's real good." And that's how the fourth day went by. Lots of folks would be plenty pleased, but Big Mama, she doesn't quit a job till it's done and done right. Big Mama looked at all the water and earth and trees and sky and sun and moon and stars, and she said, "Awful quiet down there. Better have some whales, better have some birds, better have some fish." That's exactly what happened, all right. Pretty soon there were more whales and catfish and mockingbirds and crows than a little baby could shake a stick at, which a little baby could do if a little baby wanted to, since Big Mama had already made all those trees full of sticks. Big Mama looked down at that action and she said, "That's good. That's real good." And that's how the fifth day went by. Big Mama was about ready to be done with it all. Making a world is a lot of work, with the laundry piling up and the dishes needing doing. She figured she better finish things off in one big bang. "I need some more creepers and crawlers," said Big Mama, "some runners and jumpers, some diggers and divers. Everybody else wants to get created. This here's your chance. Hedgehogs and night crawlers, raccoons and garter snakes, rabbits and polar bears." That's how Big Mama made them all. One big bang. But Big Mama still wasn't done. Oh no. "I'm lonely," said Big Mama. "Who's going to sit on the front porch and swap stories with me? Not these creepers and crawlers, not these diggers and divers. They're good all right, but not one of them can tell a story worth a plug nickel. And all this little baby can say so far is goo goo gaga. I need some folks to keep me company." Big Mama, she scooped up some of that leftover mud, and she pushed and she pulled and she poked and she pried, and the next thing you know, there were folks everywhere. Big folks and little folks, fat folks and thin folks, all kinds of shades of folks, and every one of those folks had a story to swap with Big Mama. "That's good," said Big Mama. "That's real good." And that's how the sixth day went by, with Big Mama and all those folks sitting on the porch and gabbing while the sun went down. Big Mama was ready for a rest, all right, ready to bundle up with that little baby of hers in that big blue blanket of the sky. But Big Mama had one more thing to do. She lined up all those folks and said, "This is a real nice world we got here, and if you all better take some good care of it. I'm taking a day off to rest now, but I'll be keeping an eye on you. That's what Big Mama said, all right, and you better believe she meant it. Every once in a while, when she's burping the baby or making cookies or rocking that little baby to sleep, Big Mama looks down and says, "Better straighten up down there." And every so often, Big Mama looks down on this nice little world she made, and she nods, and she smiles, and she says, "That's good. That's real good."
Thank you, Lindsay. That's one of my favorite stories. Big Mama Makes the World. Love it. Love it. So here's where we're at. We are on a stay-at-home order in Illinois at least through the end of May now, although we expect that large gatherings will not be wise or permitted for quite some time to come. We're figuring out how to make that work so that we can be connected to each other as best we can. Do check in with each other. It really warms my heart to hear about how folks have been making telephone calls and sending notes to one another in the community and thinking of people. If you're thinking of someone you usually see at coffee hour or in a group, call them up, send a note, reach out to one another. Please reach out to me if you need anything. If you're a member of the church and you've been laid off or lost tip or gig income and need some support in any way, please let me know. And we are often able to connect people who need resources. For example, earlier this week somebody needed a mask, we were able to make that happen. So let me know if you need something. Most of the staff is working from home most of the time, but we've got email and phone and video conference. We are here for you. The deep canvassing training that the Unitarian Universalist Action Network of Illinois is doing has gotten some great reviews from folks who started, and it's not too late to join. So Shiraz tells me that you should contact Ellen Ammer, give her a call or send her an email. Call might be best, time is of the essence, and they can forward the taped portions of the training from yesterday to folks so they can participate in, I think, the 3 upcoming sessions as well. We want to get more folks engaged in that. It's so important that we talk about how we can connect with our neighbors at a level of values before this November's election and in years to come. In a moment, we'll share our plate as we do each week. We'll give away 80% to Women's Space, and I am also happy to let you know that Women's Space is continuing to offer some classes like yoga and meditation and a few other things virtually during this time period, so you can check out their website. They've also been coordinating mask making, mask sewing for folks, and information is in the newsletter that Shiraz posted last week about that. We've long been friendly and had a partnership with folks at Women's Space to offer programs and work for inclusion and justice. They have a ton of creative, theological, and spiritual programs and reflections, a beautiful labyrinth on site, and it's our honor to share our support with Women's Space this morning. You can give online by texting the number that will be on the screen or by going to urockford.org/donate. Be sure to select Share the Plate from the list of funds. I also ask that if you are in the habit of making your gifts toward the operating budget on Sunday when you are here in person, you can make that gift online, or you can send a check to the church if you prefer. Please help us keep our staff and our operations fully funded during this time when we are together but apart. The offering will now be given and received.
Hello, I'm Jessica Hodiern and I'm your worship associate today. I was raised by two strong women, my mother and her mother. They were so very different, but both supported and loved me unconditionally. They each taught me different things. My mother taught me how to speak my mind, connect with nature, animals, and others deeply, how to be confident in myself and my instincts, and that I could do anything that I set my mind to. My grandmother taught me how to be resourceful and resilient, how to show love silently through my actions only, how to sit still and just be present in my surroundings, and to be authentic. They both taught me how to be a safe place for others. I carried all of these things with me as I grew older, but eventually I started taking them for granted. As I moved into adulthood and life became more and more hectic, I started to consider these things characteristics of my past, childhood traits that one grows up and out of. I became more focused on the rational and analytical side of life and felt that was just normal life progression. Then I gave birth to my daughter, and not instantly but fairly quickly, I became even more appreciative of all of the lessons that my mother and my grandmother had taught me. I started to reflect on those characteristics within myself and how I had lost them. I missed them. I looked at my son and I saw that he had known them because he was displaying them himself. I looked at my daughter and I wanted her to know them. So I got back in touch with that side of myself, and I learned again to sit and be present, to speak my mind, to be confident with my instincts, and to be authentic and connect deeply with others. It's a challenge holding on to those parts of myself in a world that doesn't encourage or value those things. The world taught me how to fit in, how to be business-like and analytical, how to network but not connect, how to value accomplishments and credentials. And there's definitely a place for that, and they do play an important role. But I feel so fortunate to have grown up in a home where it was the unquestioned norm not to focus on those things, because it's enabled me to be able to find a balance between the two. When Jesse and I got married, we had an outdoor wedding next to a lake. It was beautiful, but a very warm June day. As my grandmother was walking back to the car to leave, she had to stop for a moment and catch her breath. She closed her eyes as the breeze began to blow and lifted her chin fully to embrace it. The breeze passed and she kept walking. I saw her spirit in that moment and was amazed by it. Later that evening, although I hadn't spoken of it, my now husband told me that he had witnessed that moment too. He had said that it reminded him of me, and I knew that she had taught me something very special. Hello, I'm
There's a river
Two readings this morning on this theme of goddesses and the divine feminine. The first is an excerpt from an article published by Rosemary Radford Ruther in 1996. Rosemary Ruther was a pioneer in feminist theology, a Catholic laywoman. She began to talk about what it meant to think about God as not male, as even possibly female, and just to expand what God meant into something larger and the importance of that. She wrote radical books at the time in the 1990s. When male-only language is used for God and any feminine images rejected as inappropriate for God, it suggests that in some sense God is literally a male, and that only male image God and represent God. Women are considered a lesser form of humanity who cannot exercise authority or be independent persons, but exist only under male authority. Women are thought to represent the body, the emotions, the creaturely realm, but they cannot represent God. The relation of male and female then should be analogous to the relation of God and creatures. Second, we have tended to use particular power models for God that image divine power as like that of a monarch as a ruler or a military general who crushes all who oppose him. The model of power assumed here is one of competitive power, all powerful over those who are powerless, all good over those who are worthless, domination over subjugation. Such a concept of divine power sacralizes the same kind of totalitarian power in male human hands as godlike. Feminists are seeking an alternative understanding of power as mutual empowerment, power that does not dominate, force, or coerce, but heals, reconciles, and transforms. In the presence of such power, we are not demeaned or rendered vile and unworthy, nor made helpless and called to submit. Rather, we are called into healthy self-esteem, into the power of one's own creative agency that can affirm the good potential and creative agency of others. Healing power dissolves the competitive model of power relations where one side's power is the disempowerment of the other side, where one side's victory is the defeat of the other side. Healing power repents, forgives, and transforms relationships so that both sides of former conflicts are enlivened, made whole, and enabled to rejoice in one another's well-being. This is the appropriate understanding of the power of God, not models of power drawn for human relationships of domination, war, and violence. The second reading is a poem by Alice Notley entitled "The Goddess Who Created This Passing World." The goddess who created this passing world said, "Let there be light bulbs and liquefaction." Life spilled out onto the street, colors whirled, cars and the variously shod feet were born, and the past and future, and I born too. Light as airmail paper, away she flew, to Annapurna or Mount McKinley, or both, but instantly. Clarified, composed, forever was I, meant by her to recognize a painting as beautiful or a movie stunning, and to adore the finitude of words, and understand as surfaces my dreams, know the eye, the organ of affection, and depths to be inflectious of her voice and wrist and smile. Thus ends the readings. Enter a time of prayer and centering. Wherever you are, I invite you to take again that deep breath and be present. Spirit of life and love, wondrous power of many names, be with us. Be with us in our questing for a power that heals and connects instead of dominates or destroys. Be with us in our striving to be full of compassion instead of judgment, wonder instead of cynicism, and hope instead of fear. Bring us present to our hearts, whether our hearts might be grieving or joyous or both at once intertwined, finely woven. Open our minds, our souls, our spirits, so that we might flow with the flowing power of life this day and every day. Amen.
Mothering God, you gave me birth in the bright morning of this world. Creator, source of every breath, you are my rain, my wind, my sun. Mothering Spirit, nurturing one, in arms of patience hold me close, so that in faith I root and grow, until I flower, until I know.
Good morning and greetings from Kansas City. What a pleasure to be with the UUs of Rockford once again. I hope that you are all taking good care of yourselves and each other and finding opportunities to be of service during these perilous days. My good friend and colleague Matthew Johnson has asked me to reflect on some of the ways in which imaging the divine as female can enrich our spiritual lives, as well as some of the challenges of serving the divine as a female person and a humanist. In 1922, the early feminist Charlotte Perkins Gilman published a book about what religion might look like, imagined primarily through the eyes of women's experience. In His Religion and Hers, she wrote this: "To the death-based religion, the main question is, what is going to happen to me after I am dead? A posthumous egotism. To the birth-based religion, the main question is, what must be done for the child who is born? An immediate altruism. The death-based religions have led to a limitless individualism, a demand for the eternal extension of personality. Such good conduct as they require was to placate a deity or to benefit oneself, to acquire merit, as the Buddhist frankly puts it. The birth-based religion is necessarily and essentially altruistic, a forgetting of oneself for the good of the child, and tends to develop naturally into love and labor for the widening range of family, state, and world. The first leads our thoughts away from this world, about which we know something, into another world about which we know nothing. The first is something to be believed. The second is something to be done." I don't know how familiar Gilman was with either the Unitarianism or the Universalism of her era. She grew up in New England, but died in 1935, well before the merger of the two denominations. Yet if there is anything that can be said about our faith from its roots up until today, surely it is this: not something to be believed, but something to be done. I confess that the question, what is going to happen to me after I die, has never interested me that much. The only measure of my words and my deeds, as far as I can tell, will be the love I leave behind when I'm done. The love I leave behind here in this world. So what must be done for the child who is born? The roots of my own peculiarly Universalist, Unitarian, pagan inclination most likely originate in a duck pond. Growing up in a 1950s era Washington, D.C. Unitarian fellowship, of which my parents were all but founding members, I had no church home building until I was in my early teens. Various temporarily rented quarters served our congregation during my grade school years, but one constant throughout that time was a periodic field trip to a local cemetery, at the center of which lay a large ornamental pond framed in weeping willows, complete with a small picturesque island accessed over a bridge of vaguely oriental design. The pond was occupied by a flotilla of what seem in retrospect impossibly white, fat, complacent ducks who accepted our tribute of breadcrumbs with graceful dignity. As far as I can recall, no one ever articulated to us the significance of this curated loveliness surrounded on all sides by the resting dead. But I was aware of something important, something spiritually true in this juxtaposition, a meaningfulness held in vibrant balance that neither the graves nor the ducks would have had alone. I am confident that neither my parents nor the famed liberal religious educator Sophia Faz set out intentionally to raise a liturgical pagan. Yet that was the option that their influence left most accessible to me by the time they were done with my upbringing. Let it be noted that intellectually, I remain a thoroughgoing humanist, to whom the concept of a supernatural deity of any sort or any number has never made any sense or felt at all compelling. Nevertheless, the roots of a naturalistic mysticism were planted by the program that my UU Sunday School orchestrated and my parents endorsed in the service of an ascetic spiritual minimalism. The experience of reverence that they acknowledged had its locus in 3 identified paradigmatic events. I do not so much remember these as experiences of my own life, as I recall the expectation of adults that these had or would happen to us children at some point, and that the sensation identified as wonder would properly attach to them. One was finding a dead bird in the backyard. The suburban assumption is to be noted. Another was planting a bean seed in a Dixie cup at Sunday school and seeing it sprout, after which, in my recollection, the nascent plant usually died of neglect. And the third was the annual spring ritual of flower communion. My spiritual journey as a born and raised UU, I am a child of the merger who carries no sense of roots in either of our former denominations, might best be described as a reverse commute. My come-outer parents treated the paternal God of their own mid-century Midwest American Protestantism heritage as an intellectual disability, something to be overcome if a person had the capacity, and to be treated with respectful sympathy if they did not. I grew into my own inchoate inner life of spiritual awareness, much in the same way that my more religiously conventional peers were left to discover their sexuality, without guidance or vocabulary, in secrecy and baffled embarrassment, moved by tides of inexorable experience too powerful to be ignored. The only place my religious community had ever offered me as a holding environment for that impulse of reverence was the natural world. The other resource that UU religious education did provide was an appreciative familiarity with the myth narratives of various human cultures. I now suspect that the agenda behind From Long Ago and Many Lands, with its plethora of creation stories and other tales of the origins of things, was in fact to relativize the Judeo-Christian narratives by presenting them as equals among many of such stories, a perspective which I appreciate and which has served me well. Our iconic Christmas pageant while I was growing up was the triptych of birth stories concerning Jesus, Buddha, and Confucius, with its clear message that beneath the colorful and engaging differences of cultural detail lay a common moral about the specialness and immense potential of every newborn child anywhere. What was sacred was not baby Jesus, nor, of course, baby Buddha or baby Confucius either, but the mystery of birth. Each night a child is born is a holy night indeed. The cultural construct of Christmas offered two other paradigmatic images. One was the figure of Santa Claus, presented from my earliest memory as an amusing fairy tale, literal belief in which was reserved for those less intellectually competent, an exact and overt analog to the conventional notion of God. The other was a seasonal softening of the stark aesthetic of modernist intellectualism with its eschewal of all ornamentation. We humanists might not believe anything much about Christmas, but for the month of December it was acceptable to enjoy a sparkling, fanciful, gilded, bedecked, replete Victorian sensibility that was held to be beneath our Scandinavian teak sleekness throughout the rest of the year. The upshot of these assorted influences was to leave me with an enduring rational rejection of an anthropomorphic father god in the sky, and an equally inescapable hunger for a vocabulary with which to describe, express, summon, and share the experience of primal reverence that is utterly real and precious in my life. I discovered neo-paganism as a theological student and very young minister when it arose in the UU movement in the late 1970s and early 80s. Those reconstructed pagan traditions connected with my ascetic, liturgical, and spiritual hunger in several ways. First, as a second-wave feminist, seeking institutional authority for professional religious leadership, the exploration of feminine images of the divine was engaging to me. My upbringing had more or less forbidden me the concept of a monotheistic masculine God. However, no one had ever thought to caution me against believing in the goddess or goddesses. Diversity I understood in my spiritual bones. Paganism offered a variety of soft and playful mythologies that did not depend upon intellectual assent for their effectiveness. It celebrated female creativity and strength and acknowledged the paradoxical destructiveness that is inherent in the natural world and the human condition. The long ago permission for wonder at the robin's corpse and the bean sprout and the resonance of the scenic duck pond in the cemetery found grounding in a tradition of sorts, and the arrogant species egotism of humanism found relief in the idea of a religion that could be earth-centered. Paganism also helped to resolve my liturgical dilemma. The UUism of my childhood was thin on ceremony, and my occasional attempts to fit my longing for tangible worship forms into the structures of traditional Christianity ended up feeling like cultural misappropriation in its most disingenuous form. My guide to pagan ritual, quoting I know not whom, once told me, "We practice our religion exactly the way our ancestors did millennia ago. We make it up." With this permission in hand, I have come to understand that my style of preference is, in fact, deeply informed by Puritan modernist simplicity, the via negativa, and rationalism. There is a strand in pagan ritual that often strikes me as willfully silly, inviting me beyond my capacity to suspend disbelief. I'm basically just not ecstatic enough for spiral dances. Nevertheless, it has been helpful to understand that specific theologies do not own candles, or flowers, or scented smoke, or postures, or gestures, or wine, or bread, or water, or any other archetypal human experience or image. And pretty shiny things can be evocative all year round, not just at Christmas. As I begin my 7th decade as a practicing Unitarian Universalist, my theological tent remains firmly pitched in the soil of humanism. Yet I am entirely without patience for the perpetual debate about who is now allegedly being excluded from the ranks of our theology or ministry or congregations. The traditional theists, the humanists, and the pagans all are inclined at times to whine about being ignored or disrespected within the UU movement. But the reality is that each of these cohorts has common cause with the others against the third, and it's time that we grow up enough to recognize these affinities. The humanists and the pagans both rightfully regard with misgiving the theistic, and especially the Christian, cultural hegemony and assumption of privilege, particularly on behalf of monotheism and patriarchy of the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in this philosophy, a lot more. The pagans and the theists together take rightful exception to the dry prose and self-idolatry of humanism, which has yet to demonstrate the epistemological modesty appropriate to beings who do not have complete access to their own motivations. Reason, unsupported by enacted narrative and community attachment, will always be vulnerable to dangerous superstition and self-righteous mobs. Finally, the humanists and the theists are correct to insist on the transformative vector of history and mental rigor, viewing with justified suspicion unsupported claims of an idealized past or the simplistic goodness of nature. There is a tragic dignity to human consciousness that is honored by the emotional self-restraint of intellectual effort, and a sense of the ridiculous may represent a wholesome self-awareness, not exclusively a function of repression. Both paganism and humanism have served historically to move Unitarian Universalism into a novel religious realm, transcending its roots in Christian theism, creating a new understanding and practice of spiritual community. In no way do I want to see that Christian heritage eliminated, or those who find it their most congenial path excluded. At the same time, neither am I willing to be confined by it. It's an ongoing struggle, of course. It has been all my life. 30 years ago now, a generation of Unitarian Universalist women began demanding a liturgy and hymnody that would uphold and honor our gender identity and our bodies as direct images of the holy. It wasn't that we wanted to discard all the poetry of God as Father and male, but we knew that we would never enter into equal leadership or power with men until feminine qualities were celebrated as expressing divinity, and female language was also applied in reference to God. So the creative challenge was set forth, and we started to imagine what it would mean to sing to and about God as a reflection of women. Lady of the Season's Laughter was written as an anthem for that movement, a claim that in a consistently changing world, the source of compassion might be the one thing that we could always trust. 4 decades later, even in the midst of the assorted toxicities of the present day, I would still bear witness that our hope for human good rests in the steady mercy of our hearts for one another, that our labors for justice and dignity will come safe to the birth of a better world, and that together, women and everybody else, it is we who write history's fairer page.
And we will sing together Lady of the Season's Laughter, the hymn that Kendyl Gibbons wrote many years ago to celebrate this imagery. We'll put the words up on the screen, and you can sing along with Tim at home.
Lady of the season's laughter, in the summer's warmth be near, when the winter follows after, teach our spirits not to fear. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning year. Sister of the evening starlight, in the falling shadows stay, here among us till the far light of tomorrow's dawning ray. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning day. Mother of the generations, in whose love all life is worth, everlasting celebration. our labors safe to birth. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning earth. Goddess of all time's progression, stand with us when we engage, hands and hearts to end oppression, writing history's fairer page. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning age.
Wonderful. My thanks to my colleague and friend and mentor, Kendyl Gibbons, for this morning's sermon. A pleasure to hear her words and her thoughts this morning. I do invite you to join us for a virtual coffee hour. We'll start a few minutes after the service concludes, and the link is in the Kairos and in the Friday update, and we'd love to have you join us for a little conversation in a few moments. While we extinguish the chalice here at church, I invite you to extinguish your chalice at home. If you lit one, Lindsay will extinguish our chalice here, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we are together again. The words for our benediction from the Universalist poet May Sarton. Help us to be the always hopeful gardeners of the Spirit, who know that without darkness, nothing comes to birth, as without light, nothing flowers. We'll sing together our sung blessing, Go Your Way in Peace.
Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go our way in peace, wander as we may. Blessed is the path we take, may love guide us on our way.
Go in peace.